Two magic words are still viable in the post-ride inspections. It's all about repetition and making it easy. The pre-inspection of your ride is just to make sure that you have enough air in your tire, that the lights are working to make it more visible. It's just to make sure it's a safer ride. The post-inspection is more to make sure that your bike is ready for the next time you go out riding. So if you ride every weekend, at least you have a week to order a new tire or new chain or sprockets or whatever. And do it as quick as possible after. And if you make, it's the same as on the post, if you make it into a habit, you do it automatically, you don't even think about it. You go in, you get a cup of coffee, you go back out to the bike, and then you just do a little couple of minute inspection. And it's a good habit, both of them. On the way back, I usually fill up with gas at one of the closer gas stations, and then the bike is ready for the next time I go out riding. Also, if the bike stands parked for a while, it's better to have more gas in it and you have less condensation in the gas tank. When I do the post-ride inspection, I usually just go in alphabetical order. There's no rhyme or reason, it's just what I do. And usually I have a little list hanging on the wall that kind of tells me what to check for. So if I go off in alphabetical order, the first item on the list is the brakes. First I check the brakes, and the first thing I check is the brake disc. And on these disc brakes, the brake pads go all the way to the edge, or the brake disc, they wear all the way to the edge. So you will not, as on the car brake, you will not get a little ridge here, but you will get a ridge in here. And the default thickness of the brake disc is 5 millimeters, and it shouldn't go below 4.5. So that means that you get a 0.25 millimeter difference in thickness between this part where the brake pads hits and the brake disc. This is on the Yamaha Tenere 700. So you will get a very noticeable little ridge here. So you need a caliper, preferably a micrometer, to check the thickness of the brake disc. But you can see it just by feeling the ridge here. And the next part I check is the brake pads. It's a little bit hard to check it on this bike, so you have to get a good flashlight in order to do so. So by using a flashlight you can see the brake pad, and here it's in pretty good condition. You can see this is the steel backing plate. But here you can see the pad itself, and it shouldn't have, the minimum thickness left should be 1 millimeter according to the service manual on this bike. There should be a little 1 millimeter ridge on the brake pad to show how much pad is left, but it's kind of hard to see it on this pad. But you can clearly see the thickness of the pad, and it's pretty good in this case. So of course check all pads front and back. The next step is just to do a quick inspection of the hoses to see that there are no bulges and no cracking in the hoses showing that they're getting old. On this bike the hoses are pretty well protected. They have an extra sleeve on the outside, so sometimes it might be a little hard to see. But just check that there are no leaks, no brake fluid down here, that there is no cracking on the hose itself, and just do a quick check on it, and also check up on the brake lever and see there that it all looks good. Check the brake fluid idle level on the master cylinder. Here on this bike it's a little hard to get to because you have so many cables in front of it. So you can see it here that it's... So you can see here it looks pretty clear. If it gets dark, then it's time to change it. The default change interval is every 2 years. Bosch makes a universal brake fluid you can have for 3 years. In order to check the chain in the sprocket, you might want to put on a pair of gloves to see. In order to see if the chain is getting worn out, you can pull on the back of the chain here. And if you can pull it away from the sprocket, about 1/8 of an inch or 3 millimeter, then it's time to change the chain and the sprockets. Also, if the teeth on the sprocket, if they're getting very pointy, or if they're getting kind of a waveform, it's time to change both the sprocket and the chain. When you change the sprockets, you should always change this chain at the same time, and vice versa. And you should check the slack. On this Tenere 700, it should be between 43 and 48 millimeter from the top of the chain to the bottom of the swing arm at this little guide. Yeah, so this is this is in perfect shape. The chain looks a little dry, so I'm going to put a little bit of oil on it. This bike has a clutch cable, and you just have to check that the cable looks in good condition, and when you press it in that there are no frayed ends or anything here. Usually the clutch on these Teneres are very, very durable and you shouldn't have any issues. If you have an hydraulic clutch, just make sure that the hoses are not getting old and they're not getting cracked or just getting dry rotted. And also check down on the engine where it connects. And just make sure there are no wears or anything, any fraying of the cable where the cable hits the little barrel. Make sure that the side stand and the center stand, if you have one, are both fully lubricated so they easily swing up and down. So when you move it back up, it swings up by itself by the help of the spring here. If it's kind of slow to get up, it's usually because it's not lubricated. It takes a while for the spring to wear out, so that's rather rare. If you live in areas where they put salt on the roads, that corrodes pretty quickly. So if you ride in the winter, then that's a very common occurrence. And then as you drive off, always make sure that the stand is fully up, because if the stand is down like this, then it might lead to pretty bad accidents. Making sure that your tires are in good order is very important on a motorcycle, because you have very few square inches between you and the road. So when you do the post-ride inspection, make sure that the sidewalls are not getting old and cracked. If you have an old bike, then you only ride it for the weekends, and it's like, I don't know, 7-10 years old, and you never change the tires, you should do it, because the tire compound, as it gets older, it's the same on a car, it gets harder, and the harder it gets, the less it contacts to the road. Softer tires has a way better grip. Also make sure that you don't have any screws or nails sticking out of the tire. Down here they deeps out, getting a nail or a screw in the tire is fairly common, unfortunately. Also make sure that the thread is deep enough. It should be a minimum of 1 to 1.5 millimeters deep. And if you go out in the rough, you need a little bit more depth than that. So you can either use just a little gauge. I use my Swedish little meter stick, and it's here it's like 5 millimeters left, so it's pretty good. If you don't, these are not these little meter sticks are not that common over here in the States. So just use the old quarter, and just make sure that at least the top of the head is visible. On a quarter coin, the distance from the top of the head to the edge of the coin is 1/8 of an inch, so that's 3 millimeters. So when you're getting to that, then you should start thinking about getting a new tire. So if I adhere to my rule of going alphabetically, connecting the battery charger to the battery would be my first point on the list. But in order to be able to move around the bike more easily, I make that the last point. So I guess in other words, there are no rules without exceptions. And usually if I know I'm not going to be riding the bike, say for a week or more, I connect the battery charger, but usually I ride the bike way more often than that. And it's better to be safe than sorry, so I have a little C-Tech battery charger that I use, and I've been using that on riding lawnmowers, cars, etc. for years and years, and it's a top-notch product with very good customer service. Highly recommended. That's the post-ride inspection. If you have drum brakes, etc., then you just need to modify it to suit your motorcycle. It should be fairly easy. Have a good ride. Please subscribe and more videos to follow.